Yo, it's crazy. There's so many people here this time. I made enough food. It keeps getting bigger, and I just have to learn how to I have to buy bigger vessels. Like, I was trying to mix salads today. I had to use 2 bowls for the salads versus 1 big bowl. I should just own a big bowl. I want to say thank you to everyone that is new, because there's a lot more new people this time than there's been any other time, besides the first, because obviously everybody's new. To be honest, nothing makes me happier than doing these 2 days in a row cooking for this evening for people that like I know love it and genuinely like want to come and eat and talk and meet people that do what we do, because the people that we normally interact with don't even understand. I mean, people asking me like, oh, so you write the song? No, I don't. I can try to make it sound good. Wait, but sometimes it already sounds good, so what am I actually doing, you know? We don't really know all the time what we're doing. But I know tonight we're here to eat food and talk. Tony, our special guest, is here. Wow, that's all we got.
She's like managing my Instagram from there.
And that was kind of scary. Like, so we ended up like in one of the upper balconies.
But also, I said the night before.
I'm not certain that I wouldn't be where I'm at in my career without him, but I know it wouldn't be as fast as it was, because one can't give credit solely to one human, not even our own selves. But it would never have happened at this point in my life without him. So that's a general thank you to you in a less personal setting. Than,
That would be a public thank you.
Yeah, it's a big public thank you. I wanted to start with a bit on mentorship, because it seems like we lack that in our community, and I'm sure it's lacked in many communities outside of music making.
How many people in this room feel that they lived through an apprenticeship? Because I certainly did. So it ain't dead.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my first question to you specifically, was who was your mentor?
You know, I'll give you the same answer that I always give regarding that question, and it's both people that I sat behind, and I was lucky enough to work at a studio that had great artists coming through every day. So I sat behind a lot of professional engineers, some of whom imparted great wisdom, and some of that wisdom was just shut the fuck up, and some of that wisdom was you got to stop leaving the room. The moment you start learning is when they put a microphone somewhere you would never have done it. When, you know, after all your studying and practice or whatever you had when you were training or when you were very young and studying, you know, you were told to put a microphone, you know, whatever it was, you know, 1.5 feet from the amplifier speaker or whatever it was, right? And then you see the engineer, you know, putting a music stand in front of the speaker and putting the microphone behind the music stand, and then another microphone, you know, 20 feet away. And you're like, fuck, what? And that's when the learning really starts, right? You know, my mentorship came in little bits and pieces that I was smart enough to write down every day.
Oh, wow. You took notes?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I took notes. I took notes about everything. And maybe that's one of the smartest things I ever did. In fact, the studio had a book that had every engineer's setup in it. So I, of course, copied that and then added to it, and would not only know where they liked their bass, drums, guitar setup, but exactly how they patched everything, you know, what the settings were, all of that stuff. So those guys didn't even know they were my mentors, really. They just were, because I paid attention and wrote down every damn thing they did. As far as mixing goes, or producing even, that's kind of what you need. You need to train your ear to remember what sounds are representing a certain feeling or representing a certain vibe, or a certain period, right?
So you don't necessarily, if you don't have one particular person that was true in the sense of the word mentor, definition of mentor, when did it become clear to you that you wanted to mentor people? Like, what made you think that it was necessary? Because you seem to be one of the few people that are in this game that have actually decided, I'm going to mentor. And I have other questions to ask on that later.
Yeah.
Beyond.
When the studio system kind of collapsed, the commercial studio system collapsed in New York, because studios hired the assistant engineers. I mean, I would work at Hit Factory for 2 years. I would book 2 rooms for 2 years, and I would have one main assistant, and then another one who kind of toggled in and back and forth. But it was harder to mentor because you didn't know if the dude was going to get fired, especially at Hit Factory. They were in and out quick.
Right.
So my ability to invest was different. But then the studio system kind of fell apart, and I started renting a room by the month, and I hired a friend of mine, Zach Hancock, to assist me, and so in essence, he was my first, dedicated apprentice.
Right. Here, he turned out pretty well for himself.
He's doing well.
You
He's doing well.
You have a good track record. If he was your first.
Fingers crossed.
No, it's kind of unreal. On that note, actually jumping forward 30 years or so. I'm assuming it's like probably about 30 years because
It's only 20.
okay, I'm gonna stick with 30 because I have more to talk about later. On that. But what was the last time? I have something comes to mind for me, but I want to think outside of myself in this moment. What was the last time you learned something like the mic technique that you watched happen from the behind the music stand from someone else that you've mentored? When you're like, oh, I've never done it that way.
Well, it wouldn't be mic technique because I don't record that much
definitely
anymore.
not. Fuck mic technique. I just need a technique that you were like, oh, that's wow, yeah, I never would have done that.
Oh, I think everyone in this room who is what I consider on my team,
Yeah,
I have learned from.
yeah,
Every single person in this room. Yeah, there isn't any one of you, whether it's Justin, James, Tyler, yourself,
yeah,
Miles, now Najib,
yeah.
Ryan, everyone in this room who has worked with me has given me something. Spider is the genius of us all,
Yeah.
of course.
Of course.
And, the really awesome thing is that when I am lucky enough to work with one of the team members, it's great to see the development. Going from where we were when they were my second to where they are now as engineer.
Can we talk about that a little more specifically and a little bit more personal, potentially, just about you and I and how? Because I don't want to make you have to speak on anybody else, but I want to take it. What along the time frame of being your apprentice? Why did you allow me to still be me, and then not necessarily potentially mix like a mirror image of you, and always give and share your secrets to a point where like I'm going to become an incarnate version of yourself?
So it was obvious to me that I could tell you exactly how I do everything I do. And sure, there are moments I listen to your work and go, yeah, motherfucker. That's my shit, you know what I'm saying? And I do it with everybody else on the team as well. So I claim it personally.
You should.
And
Absolutely.
but it also makes me feel good that I wasn't wasting my fucking time.
Yeah.
You know, and it wasn't really my intention. I mean, it wasn't my intention for you guys to be exactly the same as me. There's no value in that. There's no value in that for the business itself. You know, that doesn't do anything.
Well,
for the business.
when
Plus, I want to still work.
dude, you're fucking working.
I would hustle around and listen to music and spend a lot of time paying attention to things that I thought were on the come up instead. And I would hustle those records. And I would always try to, you know, at the time I had a manager, I would try to get them to get me on that record, whatever it is. And you know, and I would just hustle those records all I can. Or I would communicate with the A&R people that I was familiar with, or the producers and managers that I was familiar with, and try to listen to whatever is cool and whatever's coming out, and I, you know, and I got lucky. And a lot of the work that I did was good. I mean, the first choice I made was just to stay away from 80s rock, which I thought was, you know, hair bands were fucking not good to me. So I always try to find things that were new and interesting.
You were able to pick. I feel like we're living in a time where technology is changing in our industry a bit, which we can get to kind of on the DSPs and that whole conversation. But you existed in that prime time where MIDI was being created, right? So you were able to specialize, right? You should tell everybody kind of a bit more about this than I can say. But you were able to specialize in syncing drum machines and tape machines so you can make hip hop actually bump by adding samples to samples. So you could, and that's kind of that first time where you understood where technology was going, kind of jumped the gun there, where I think we're about to hit that part 2 now, or part 4 for you? I can't even know. I always thought it was 3 decades, no, it's 4. But that was that pivotal moment in your career, right? Where you kind of landed a thing.
Contemporaries I was around wanted to make rock music, and I was fascinated by electronic stuff. That was just my engineering kind of gene, and so I learned every piece of MIDI gear, every keyboard that was made, every drum machine, sampler, whatever it was, I learned how to use it. Most of my engineering life, you know, in my early, you know, when I went independent, because I was struggling, a good portion of my engineering life was just, you know, running from room to room, like showing people how to do shit. And then recording a vocal, and then editing it, and, you know, running to the room over there and doing something else. So it was a constant thing.
So now that everyone can do everything, or everyone thinks that they can do everything, right? So we'll just jump ahead in time. Where do you see our role existing in and out of the bedroom?
Well, you know, the interesting thing that the bedroom has given us is, remember when I was talking about the microphone and the producer who said, fuck it, I'm going to put the mic behind the music stand and do weird shit. Well, the bedroom kind of has given us that. It's given us like a completely different take on what is good or bad. And that's interesting. It needs to be refined, that's for sure.
Sure.
Because everybody who gets a session from a producer who does it in their bedroom knows, like, the fucking gain structure is all fucked up. But that's part of their sound, so you have to kind of, you know, reverse engineer it and figure out, well, it's cool, but it's cool for only these 3 reasons. The other shit sucks. Like the vocal, you know, sounds like it's in a closet, That's not good. We don't want that. So, okay, the snare drum is good. Okay, we like the snare drum. Let's figure out why the snare drum is good. And if it's because the vocal is making the snare drum envelope change, okay, well then, copy the vocal or send a fader send to the compressor that made the snare do that, right? Everybody in here, I'm sure, knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So my point is, the technology today, sure, it's expansive what can happen, but it still takes an engineer, in my opinion, to create gain structure that works forever, right? Because we're making records forever. We're not making them for this fucking week and then nobody ever hears it again. I'm making records for things that are supposed to last for forever.
Yeah.
And that to me takes an engineer's mind. It takes a great artist and a producer and amazing musicians and things like that to come up with the ideas. But it takes a good engineer to be able to understand the technology, to be able to make sure that it's something that's going to stand up, 50 years from now, 30 years from now, 20 years from now, 2 years from now. So that when mastering techniques change and all of a sudden everybody hates maximized files, everybody in this room going to be ready for that shit?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I am.
Yeah.
My guys are, that's for sure. But it's something to think about because it does change. I'm living proof.
Yeah.
It changes. And people do they do want, my point is that the master that I created needs to be remastered generation. Right? Because that's just the way life is. Because the kids of today aren't going to understand, the file that I saved 20 years ago. That's just not going to make sense to them. So it has to be remastered. So is my master going to hold up?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, it's just a Kodak away, right? We're just going to get at least WAV file streaming on all platforms.
5G is going to change the world.
Right.
So how that works and what that means to your file is something that y'all better be thinking about. I'm certainly always thinking about it. Always. It's always. I mean, where's Dale?
Right here.
Yeah, see? He's back there.
He's over there thinking about it.
I count on that motherfucker to make sure it sounds good today. The mastering engineer's job has always been that year, that moment in time, pop culture. They've got to keep up with that too, but that's their job. They're releasing it to pop culture, and that's a moving target. It changes with the technology. I mean, don't forget, we used to bring it to two different mastering guys, one to cut the vinyl, and one to do the radio version.
So if you're calling it a fake master, right?
Pre-master.
But if that's the one that makes it, you would potentially make different mix choices into that fake master chain that would be the master then. Could be a more optimal version of the mix if you were working through your own master chain.
Still
leaving
in
headroom.
a perfect world, you're right. But everyone knows they want it yesterday.
Yeah, sure.
I didn't have a choice. When a master came back from somebody in New York and Gallant said, I don't like it. I like yours better. And I say, no, we can get him to make it better. And, Gallant's like, no, we have to use yours. We don't have any time. It's got to be done now.
Yeah.
Then I don't have any time to go back and tweak the mix.
Yeah.
It's just, that's it. It's being released tomorrow. People just are so obsessed with loud.
Can I come back to one thing you said earlier?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. And I've heard it mirrored in a few people who have had, dynastic success. The role that being on the front edge of the technology that was coming out and how that helped you craft your unique approach. I felt like it kind of got glazed over, but I actually like it made me kind of like, wow, that's pretty, because so much of us now are using the same things and working with the same technology and even the same kind of technology, like the plugin might change, but it's still plugin. And yeah, I was just kind of actually curious about the history of, you mentioned there was a pretty interesting, you were one of the first people to be, laying samples and using drum machines, and just kind of curious.
Well, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, in what we were just talking about, I try to get the technology out of the fucking way and allow the song to really do its thing. People didn't even think we were making music. They didn't. It's not a fucking joke. Like, we didn't get Grammy nominations. They didn't think we were making music. They thought we should be like cut off from the world. They thought the music we made was bullshit. I'd read Mix magazine and be like, Ed Cherney, rest in peace, by the way. All the greats would be in Mix magazine every fucking month, and yeah, they are amazing. We didn't get Grammy nominations. We didn't get.
You were doing something new.
We were doing something that had never been done, and it took a long time for the market to catch up. It took a long time for the record companies to catch up. It took a long time for engineers to catch up. It really did. Again, my approach has always been, and it comes from that period when, I was enveloped in a culture that was not a typical music making culture. It was a culture where there was a passion to make music and an understanding. I had to expand to understand how to make the best records. So my job was to record the sequencer. He left the room. I recorded everything down. I played it, sequenced it, locked it to the tape, blah, 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 did all that. And then I started working, cleaning things up, or what I thought was cleaning things up. And I removed, on the kick drum there'd be like boof, boof, and little crackles and just noise. And on the snare, on everything, there was noise on everything. So I'm gating and I'm working really hard to clean that stuff up and EQ it out and do all this stuff. And and he comes in the room and he's like, dude, what the fuck you doing to my beat? And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, bumping, man. It sounds great. What are you talking about? And he's like, no, you got rid of the whole feel, And I took off all the gates and the EQs and stuff. And he's like, yeah, that's it. That's the feel. Make that bump. Don't change it. And it was a very quick lesson. I mean, when we talked about mentors, those guys were definitely my mentors. They taught me what it meant to have that stuff on it. So that when I started doing, those guys were doing R&B, of course. When I started engineering hip hop, it was a completely natural thing for me because I didn't try to fix that shit. So no, everybody understood that I got it, that I understood what it was supposed to be doing, that I understood what they were doing. So my point is that from a very early age, I had to understand what I'm given. What is the concept of what I'm working on? So when I'm given something, say today, by someone who has heavily wound up a mix, a rough mix, and a session, he's got his session with all his T-Rex shit on there, it's fucking ozone up the motherfucker, and he's got every CLA on that some bitch, and I gotta try to figure out what to do. Obviously, the first thing I'm gonna do is pay attention to why is he doing that, and what, because he's obviously, I have to trust that he has a reason for doing that it sounds good to him, and I have to figure out why it sounds good to him. And I have to understand that, and I have to sort of, as I said earlier, deconstruct that. So I think that's a big part of my staying power, is that I pay attention to what guys give me, and I don't just crank out, Tony Maserati mix number 5, and not that I think I could ever do that. I was never good at that in the first place.
Right.
I mean, some of my colleagues are really good at their consistent boom. They crank that shit out, and it sounds like them. I don't know who the artist is, but it sounds like them.
Right.
As the mixer, and I've never been very good at that. And maybe it's because of those early records that I did and those hip hop producers that I was lucky enough to work with, who taught me that I need to fucking pay attention.
So you're talking about understanding intention, understanding reference points, understanding.
Yeah, understanding intention.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's.
And also, you've got to judge, right? Because they're not always good.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. You've got to be a good judge. Like, some people are fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Some people you listen to and you think it's shit. And then you listen 2 more times, 3 more times. Wait 1 second. This is freaking brilliant, So you got to pay attention.
Yeah.
But you also have to judge. Because there are some, I mean, I've gone the wrong way. Like, I will work on something and I'm like, totally respect, man, and dig what you're doing. I sent it to them, they're like, dude, fuck this. Like, give me the Maserati shit, man.
Right.
So it goes both ways. You have to be a good judge as well about what they give you, and be able to have a conversation with them if necessary, because quite often I'll not know what to do, and I'll call them and say, what are you looking for, man?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll get, do you? And sometimes I'll get, I fucking love this rough, man. Just, put a little stardust on it and let's call it a day.
Yeah.
And I'll do that if that's what they want.
I remember sitting, I would be doing mixes across the hall, and you'd come in and you would never, ever tell me that something didn't sound good. Be like, something about the feel of that guitar. It was always about feel. I don't think you ever gave me any sonic comments on EQ. Or at least I can't think of it. The ones that come to mind are always, man, go play the rough. Yeah, listen to the guitar, it's looser. They're like, I gotta take that compressor off. And now I'm in a state of post compression. I don't ever reach for a compressor. So I think it came from, wait, the producer's good. I'm working with this person. Why am I compressing their hi-hat loop? I mean, when was the last time you needed to compress a hi-hat loop that was a splice loop? It's the swing. It is what it is. And if you do, you're going to change it. Granted, you could enhance it and change it for the better. I'm not saying that compression can't change the feel and make it better. But more times than not, you'll probably fuck it up. Especially if you're over-compressing. But it just always stuck with me, because the ways that you would give comments, I'm sure it was to all of us, not just me, where it's always about feel. Like, a good record, I mean, yeah, I'm biased. I want shit to sound really good. I want to be able to crank it like Usher's Confessions and turn that shit up as loud as it goes, and that's always going to feel good. That's how I feel about your JoJo mix. Just go up, 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 and it feels good, good, good always. Versus something else, you're like, constantly always wanting to strive for the best sonic record, but it's always about feeling first. And then if you can find happy medium, and you definitely instill that, I think, in all of us.
Yeah.
And I would hope that like resonates outside of.
Yeah, I mean, that's really job one, and you know, in the end, nobody buys a record for the mix. Nobody. They buy the record for how their mix makes them feel, and how the song makes them feel. And I learned that very early on. And again, you know, the mentors that I had instilled it on me, you know, very dramatically, because they didn't care about the mix. I was the only one in the room who gave a shit about the mix. All they cared about was the feel. So that made me care about the feel. And it made me understand that.
Talking about what potentially people that are, so the phrase "a framework to be great" comes to mind. Like if someone were to approach you, want to be your apprentice, right? Or you approach them. What are you looking for? What have you looked for in the past? When did you realize that you had a skill that you were able to even offer mentorship? And how long do you see it lasting? And so I'll stop there. Like, do you think there are criteria, right, that one would have to have?
You know, I think really anybody who's a professional, y'all in this room, you should be mentoring people. You know, the things that I was given by those producers, those engineers, and my clients, that stuff is not written down. It's in maybe the videos, a little bit of it, but most of it is in these guys who have been with me. That's where it is. And it's never going to be in a book. So really, it's your job to give it to somebody else, because they're gonna, you know, the music business is a thing that lives and breathes, it continues, right? I didn't show up at its inception. I showed up, you know, somewhere, you know, in the pop culture moment that I did. And there's a dramatic history that happened before me, and there's a dramatic future that'll happen after me. And you know, those guys and women who made records before us, they were amazing. I mean, I'm sure all of you have read about the making of early records and what went into them. I mean, anybody who's read anything about the Beatles, it just blows my mind to this day. Everything they did with 4 tracks and the equipment they had to make to do things is just outrageous. But everybody did that, you know? No matter what city you were in, that's how shit was done. And you know, they gave that stuff to the generation before me, and the generation before me gave it to me. And I can't build a compressor, so they didn't give me that. I mean, maybe somebody tried to, and I just was like too stupid. But they gave me what the compressor was for, and it wasn't just for gain reduction. They gave me the purpose of it, and the intention of how to use it, and those kinds of things, and the same goes for everything that all the technology you have today. So I think it's up to everyone to create some mentorship within the framework of what they do. I have been lucky enough to have just continued working, and I need assistance, and a big part of what I give them is intentionally giving them something that I think they deserve for the time they spend with me and for their future. And it's not always the same. For every one of you guys, you can probably talk to each other and realize that it wasn't the same lesson, because each one of you is different, and each one of you required a different method. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think that that's not an easy thing. A lot of my colleagues don't like doing it, but it has been probably, when we talk about longevity and continuing, the support that I get from the 6 or 8 or number, whatever the number is at this point, of you guys, has allowed me to continue. The fact that we can, Miles is shoving fucking ozone up my ass.
Hell yeah, bro.
In the
Shove it
same
up.
way, but in the same way that you shove, whatever.
Fab filter at the time, probably.
Something. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever it was.
You're still using EQ7, man.
That's right. that's absolutely right. I remember you and Tab removed EQ7. but you understand, so I get a tremendous amount of new knowledge. I get a tremendous amount of somebody looking at me. You guys look at me in the same way I look at you. And that is, you need help in this. You need help in that. You always mess up in this, or you know what I'm saying? And then you look back at me and say, dude, why aren't you using X, Y, and Z? Or why are you still doing that? Or why don't you get this? Or, this piece of gear is going to up your game, or whatever it is. I think that the benefits that we all get from having worked together is a tremendous amount of that.
We're all very lucky.
Yeah, and we all are together, which is I think that that all of y'all who are independent and you have assistants, I remember an engineer when I was an assistant. I wasn't even an assistant. I was like a second assistant, like the dude who ran around and moved tapes and helped align the tape machine. Then they throw you out. But I remember coming into a room and an engineer had just left. And this guy was such a dick, really. But he told the assistant that he had to normal the console before anyone showed up. Like, I couldn't even go in the room when the console still had, the settings, because he didn't want anybody to see what EQ or whatever he did. Now, we're talking about, first of all,
Oh my god.
fucking console.
Right.
Right? It's a console. You can't conceptually look at it without the sound of the thing. What the fuck are you looking at, right? So immediately I was like, he's a bigger dick than I thought he was. But that engineer missed the whole idea of making music, in my opinion. Like, music is made, it's a collaborative thing. I mean, not as much for the person who makes, everything, does all the parts in his bedroom. without any other humans, but at some point he's going to hand that to somebody, and somebody's got to listen to it and either sing on it or play on it or engineer on it or do something. There's a collaborative thing going on, and that means another set of ears. And every set of ears is going to process that sound differently. And so those EQs that this engineer didn't want anybody to see makes no sense to anyone but him. And that's fine, because that's his head and his ears. But it doesn't make sense to anybody to hide stuff like that. Because everybody does it differently, everybody hears it differently. I mean, if I taught y'all to just copy what I did, then you'd all suck right now.
Yeah.
You would. You would not be fucking successful at all.
We'd still be copying. We'd just be
Yeah,
trying.
you'd just be trying to fucking copy me.
Yeah.
And that just would be
I am
stupid.
though. I am though. Fact, man. I'm trying.
Because you got a sub, man. We're gonna get some tannoys up in this piece.
That was really important. It seems to me that I want to move to some quick, maybe some other questions from other people, but I want to just touch on one thing: collaborative process. Mixing doesn't seem to be very collaborative.
Less so now.
Yeah,
Less
so now. It always was in our camp. We always.
Yeah, I mean, we
yeah.
did.
Yeah.
We did. And we still do. I mean, that's how it lives in my world. I'm assuming
same.
in your room it does as well,
Yeah.
and you guys as well. I mean, that's how I live.
Yeah.
If I can't ask somebody that I trust, like, what do you think, and they can't answer me honestly, then I'm not a good mentor, first of all, and I'm not a good human.